Hi, and welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. I'm Jonathan Burke, here with Arthur Medakis. Quentin has the day off. Um, this one is going to be season 10, episode 11, and we're going to talk about incomplete cycles of action. A cycle of action is start, change, stop in independent Scientology. And there's a lot more to it than meets the eye as far as incomplete cycles go. And Arthur and I and Quentin, we usually talk about what we're going to do a podcast on. After about 30 seconds, we're like, okay, we better hit record before we lose any of this.
Yes, yes.
So this is that. And what was it you were just saying about incomplete cycles and from your viewpoint and uh all that?
Yes. So, because I sort of slip between both the Scientology version of something, and then we've got like the common day version of something. And I was talking about um how an incomplete cycle could lead someone to appear to be like a narcissist. And then you asked me how so.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, well, if people have incomplete cycles, which will then lead to withholds, which will then lead to overt acts, which will then lead to having the appearance of narcissistic behavior, which is the overt act itself.
Yeah. Well, my thought on it, when you were saying that is that the actual sequence of events, or is there another sequence of events?
All right. So when you say other sequence of events, what sequence would that be?
Well, what you just said isn't incorrect.
Yep.
Uh, and of course, I mean, just as far as from a technical standpoint, from an auditing and a Scientology administration standpoint, what
Yep.
what is an incomplete cycle? Is it an overt? Is it an overt and then it's a withhold and you don't complete the cycle of action? I tend to think that it is both and then a little bit more actually. But for if we can, let's
Yep.
let's let's go to what it is that people what it is you're auditing. You're auditing incomplete cycles of action. You've got start, you've got change. Start is you create something in your universe as a being, and you go, okay, I'm going to put this in the physical universe. You put it in the physical universe. That's a postulate. Now, once you've made that postulate and you put it into doing, now you are changing. Starting is doing the postulate, changing is getting going on it in the physical universe because we're all just a bunch of bulldozers in the physical universe moving matter, energy, space through time. Well, matter and energy through space and time, technically, or that's the
Mm.
apparency thereof, and that's how you get something achieved that you have postulated as far as on the having side of things. So you want to brush your teeth, you decide I need to brush my teeth twice a day when I get up and I go to bed. Okay, now
Yep.
you have to put that into motion, and then you find, well, okay, gosh, I didn't brush my teeth at all yesterday. Or
Yep.
I brushed them once, but it was the day after, or something like that. So that's an
Yep.
incomplete cycle. Well, as it manifests in auditing, everything that we're auditing is an incomplete cycle when it gets down to it.
Yep.
Everything an auditor audits is an incomplete cycle. And that gets into the states of being, Axiom 11, isness, alter isness, not isness, as
Mm-hmm.
isness. So an incomplete cycle
Yep.
is what of those states of being?
An alter is.
Right. It's an
Yep.
alter
Because
is.
it's incomplete.
Yeah.
And that's where you could throw in justifications as well for your incomplete cycles as well. Then you've got
Right.
all those things occurring as well. Then you've got um, energetic mass on your body also with an incomplete cycle. That heaviness, that heavy feeling,
right?
Um,
The mocking. I mean,
um,
it's all mocking up of mass. I mean,
yeah,
that's what
yeah.
a thetan does. Is a thetan controls and creates matter, energy, space, and time in their own universe. That is why there is
Yes.
something to audit, because it is an incomplete cycle. An engram, what
Mm,
is an engram, an incomplete cycle? Yes, it is.
yep.
Is a
Yep.
secondary an incomplete cycle? Yes. We were just talking
Mm,
about this morning.
mm-hmm.
The secondary
And it's
is
interesting
an
if I could
incomplete cycle.
just go back a little bit.
Sure.
When I was studying when I was doing the communication course. Oh, actually, no. It's in problems of work. Start, change, stop. That process, or is that in the communication as well? In the communication course.
Well, a communication, an incomplete communication is an incomplete cycle of action. An interrupted
Yeah.
communication is an incomplete cycle of action. That is why your TRs, your training regimens, your 0 through 4, and all the way up to TRs 5 through 9, they can be incomplete cycles of action as well. That's what hangs up a
Yep.
pre-clear in session when there's an incomplete cycle of communication. But what that is restimulating the pre-clears earlier incomplete cycles of communication, which restimulates the reactive mind and creates this earlier similar, or
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
engram engram chain. Either way you want to look at it, whether it's Dianetics or Scientology, that's what you're doing when you have an incomplete cycle of communication with somebody else, with yourself, with your dynamics, the physical universe, plants, animals, the third dynamic, second dynamic, eighth dynamic, you name it. So all of these things are incomplete
Yep.
cycles of communication in the form of creation.
Yep. And what I found really interesting when when I was studying this cycle, start, change, stop. Start and stop made sense, but I really got stuck on the word change.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found interesting about it was it wasn't a real logical kind of thing once I understood it. It was like it was actually quite a big breakthrough for me because we're always moving forward to some degree, and then we're always changing something. So if I walk from from where I'm sitting now to to my front door, I've literally just changed my environment just by making that movement.
Yeah.
My energetically, I've changed everything. I've changed airflow. I've changed particle structure. I've changed potential futures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've changed so many things, and it took me a long time to sort of really understand how change works. And when it comes to, like, say, these incomplete cycles, you're faced with a situation. Now, your potential future has also changed with this new change,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's stuck or whether it's freeing. Because then when you change again, say through getting these engrams sorted, you go through a new change. It's just a constant change. It's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. And it's hard to explain in words, but once it clicked within me, I was just like, holy crap, there's nothing in this world that we do that doesn't that isn't affected by change in some way
Well, yeah, in the physical universe, yes,
in the physical universe. Yeah.
yeah. In the theta universe, the universe of which you are a part of, the theta universe, is there really any change? Yeah, there is, because you change it. But the problem, and this is demonstrated and explained in the Scientology and Dianetic axioms, is the change, the start and the change is something that you're creating, because you're creating it in the physical universe. You have a suit that you wear called your body, and your body is
Yep.
that which you are manipulating the physical universe around with. It's the hand in the plastic bubble and the
Yep.
inside of the bubble is the physical universe, and you're just putting your satanic hand into your suit and moving this stuff around. And so
Yep.
an incomplete cycle is a create that has not been stopped
Or
and
completed.
or completed. Yeah, stopped. I mean, you start,
Yep.
change, stop is
Yep.
create, survive, persist, destroy. So when you get a cup of coffee, you decide you're going to have a cup of coffee, like I do here on the left. There are lots of cycles of action there, but the destroy is I drink the coffee. Now I need to go make another one, or I don't
Yep.
make another one, and now I'm on a different cycle of action. But to the degree that you
Yep.
leave these cycles of action open in the physical universe is to the degree that you're leaving debris and you're like, okay, where did I put my keys? And where did I put my keys is
Yes. Yes.
who am I this lifetime, and did I complete all of those goals? And that's where LRH came up with all of this goals handling in the early to mid 60s on the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, is that you have these
Mm.
goals that are left open with this intent, and this pulls you away as a being, because you're a battery distributing your energy, scattering it throughout the physical universe, which is a bunch of sets of keys that you've left lying around, and you never finish those cycles of action, which dilutes
Mm.
your ability to do other things, because you're so, like, to use his expression, not mine, you're buttered all over the universe, the physical universe. Now, multiply
Yep.
this out over trillinia, you've got a lot of set of keys laying around.
Well, not only trillinia, but even just this lifetime. Huh.
Well, right.
So
That's what I'm saying. It stacks up pretty quick.
yeah, yeah, which is a lot of mass, which is a lot to carry around on top of this meat body,
That's right.
which actually feels heavier than the physical body feels on its own,
Yeah.
interestingly.
Yeah. And that is the issue with incomplete cycles of action, whether you're talking about auditing incomplete cycles of action, or you're talking about incomplete cycles of action of what are all of these things that I've started and I've
Yep.
changed and I put into the physical universe, and now I'm completely dispersed because I have my attention all over the place. And that's why it's
Mm.
important, just on a as a personal maintenance sort of a thing, is to get your incomplete cycles completed. Make a list of those incomplete cycles. Do I still want to
Yes.
make do I still want to pursue these postulates that I put out there, or do I want to say, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I was interested in learning how to do X, and then I got into it and I
Yes.
was like, wow, this is really complicated. This might take me a long time. This is too much for me. But you didn't sit down and say, I'm not going to do this. You just left it. How many of these things have you left? Make a list,
Yep.
handle them, decide I'm going to withdraw that postulate and I'm going to create it on top of it and just cancel it out and say, okay, that's that. And once you get these incomplete cycles, you'll find that your flows open up. Same thing occurs with auditing. As you handle
Yes.
these stuck considerations that you've made, or there are considerations that you've made that are altered from what the real reality is. That's an incomplete cycle as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, um, but then a completed cycle then leads to non-existence. Is that correct?
Well, it's an as isness. You've as is it. You've set
Mm.
out what you need to do, and then and this carries over into uh, the Scientology ethics conditions and power change. The rule
Mm.
of power changes is you write up every hat on a post or position that you have, and how to do it and get it in the hands of the guy who's going to be taking over the post.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yes. Because I mean, like let's say you've got an incomplete cycle from 30 years ago, for example. I don't know, a relationship had failed and you knew you did something wrong to create that.
Yep.
And it's always haunting you in the back of your mind, like it's just there.
Yep.
Um, it's an incomplete cycle. To
Hmm.
complete that cycle might be to make amends with this person, for example.
Yeah.
Confront it, finish it. But it could also be as simple as making a decision. There is nothing I can do about that. It's done.
Yeah.
So
It can be.
that just that kind of decision, like you were saying before, this is too hard, and not making a decision about it versus, wow, I'm really out of my league. This will be impossible for me to do. Like similar similar kind of approaches to ending that cycle. However, one's definite, a definite decision has been made, and the other one is still question mark. I'm
Yeah,
still
because
not sure how to proceed.
I mean, some when you get in a situation, some things never come clear. Like we were talking about earlier
Yep,
this morning. You know,
yep,
you want a written document of, okay, this is how everything went down, why it went down, how it went down, and it is the absolute truth, not from anybody's viewpoint. It is just an as isness.
yes.
That's something
Well,
in the physical
only when it
universe. We
becomes an as-isness.
Right, right, and the
Yeah,
only way, if it's left uninspected through two-way communication, or if you're a solo auditor and you're solo auditing it, you can still get an as isness on it as well. Until then, it's going to mess with you, just like where you left your
yes.
keys.
Can we can we expand a little bit on as ising something? Because when I was first introduced to that, I actually found it really difficult to get my head around. How do you as is something?
Most people do, How do you
Yeah,
as is
it's
something?
how do you as is something? How do you get to a point where you've as is something, it doesn't affect you anymore? You see it for what it is.
Well, I mean, there's a little bit that goes into that. I mean, whether you want to say a little bit or a lot, is
Yep.
what is irresponsibility? Is it an isness, an alter
Irresponsibility.
isness, a not isness? It's definitely not an as isness. So it's not isness,
Yeah. So it's an alter
alter
isness.
isness. Right.
Um, yeah, because there's an element of avoidance there. There's an element of there's no confronting that. There's no completed cycle. Um,
Right. Because
it's
non-confront
all those things.
is an incomplete cycle. And that's why auditing works, is
Yep.
the auditor directs the PC's attention, the pre-clear's attention, to look at things that they are unwilling to inspect themselves. It's sort of a, okay, go ahead, take a look, but I don't want to. It's all right. Go ahead and
Yep.
take a look. It's not
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
bite.
Yeah.
It's not going to bite you. Take a look. Take a look. Well, there was, yeah, and da 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 da, yeah, da, da, yeah, okay. And if you're dealing with, I mean, responsibility is difficult for any being because they have to own up to it, and that takes a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
confront. Whether you're
Doesn't
talking
it?
about Genghis Khan eliminating 10% of the population today,
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like you were mentioning earlier this morning, uh, the being that was Genghis Khan, and getting Genghis Khan to look at that and go, "So what did you do there, old Gingo?" Um, wow. I don't see anything wrong with it. That's just what I did. Okay. Would you want that done to you? Well,
Mm.
no. Okay. So what happened there? And it's not
Well, this
this,
is why I'm doing it to someone else because I
this
don't
is
want it done
because
to
I don't
me.
want it done to me. Right. Exactly. Right. It's better to be proactive than it is reactive. So,
And he was extremely proactive.
yeah. Yeah, it was extremely
Yeah.
proactive, is you kill them before they kill you. End of story. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's right. Yep,
And this is the common thread on this planet, is the only way to survive is extinguish your enemy.
that's
And
right.
and extinguish any of the things. I mean, there's that old expression, dead men don't tell tales. So
Yep.
what is it that a person is doing if you look at it through the lens of an incomplete cycle, where they're extinguishing a person or getting them out of their space or out of their country or out of their planet or out of their universe. Why is it that they're doing that? Well, they're committing an overt on
Well,
top of another overt in order to withhold the fact
yep.
that they did something else. So where is the ultimate incomplete cycle in that? Well, the incomplete cycle is,
Well, yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, go.
The incomplete cycle is that they created this idea that I need to take out 10% of the world's population today.
Yeah, yeah. Because um and it could be like the simplest of reasons according to him. Well, it could be from the outside, it could be the simplest of reasons as to why he chose to do that.
Well,
You
yeah,
know
I
what I
mean,
mean? It could have
it's a,
been as a
it's a
kid.
postulate. Yeah,
Yeah, as a kid, the neighboring village stole a loaf of bread from his family because they were starving.
yeah,
So he could have created that postulate when he's man enough and old enough. He's not going to be short of bread again. And it could be
right.
like that. That's simple.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the parables in modern culture. The same thing happened to Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars. How did Darth
Hmm.
Vader become Darth Vader? The Sand
Yeah.
People
I
killed
actually
his
can't
mom.
remember.
The Sand People killed his
That's right.
mom.
Yes.
Okay,
That's right.
and he thought
That's
that
right.
that was unjust, and he already had abilities with a lightsaber and all this stuff. So he just went out and killed every sand person he could find in the camp, women and children and men and everything. And then once you do that,
Yep.
it's much easier because you've desensitized yourself that you can then continue on killing and killing in larger groups. And then you let's fast forward it to um, Grand Moff Tarkin on the Death Star and Darth Vader standing there next to Princess Leia, and we will make a demonstration and we will destroy the planet of Alderaan with our big
Okay.
old Death Star.
Here's a
And
contrast.
yeah,
Um, a failed artist named Adolf Hitler versus a lawyer named Gandhi.
right. Well,
So both of them did big things,
yeah,
and they both had their reasons for doing so,
yeah,
but in very different, contrasting ways.
yeah. Well, I
But
mean,
the same, but they both had their motivators to do what they did.
yeah. Well, and there's that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist type of a thing, and all of these things you have different viewpoints and stuff like that. I mean, you could find
Yep,
good with the worst person, and you could find horrible with the best person. Absolutes are
yep,
unattainable. Gandhi was a little loose in the sex department. He
yep,
he he had lots of affairs and stuff like that. Martin Luther King
yep,
had affairs, and
yep,
Hitler, brought together a nation that had been completely beat down after World War One, and he was fed up with Germany being everybody's bitch. Basically, is what it came down to. You know, from Hitler's viewpoint, he was trying to restore a country that had been completely broken in the department of World War One, and how they were behind the eight ball. And a lot of
yep,
Germans were like, well, look, we're rising to power and everything, and then things got out of control, and then they started going after the Jews and all this stuff. So you know it, there's good and bad
Well,
in
because even
everybody.
before that, well, yeah, that's right. But like even before that, like one man saw evil in the world. Well,
Hmm.
actually, to some degree, they both saw evil in the world. Um, through Gandhi through the money aspect, and then the politics and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Hitler through control. They both saw some kind of poison in the world, and they both took completely polar opposite approaches on how to handle it,
Right. And so
which is pretty interesting.
where does incomplete cycles and as isness, what does this have to do with Gandhi and Adolf Hitler? I'm sure
Well, I
our
suppose,
listeners are like, where are we headed with this?
what are you talking about? Yeah. I guess they both attempted to complete their cycles, but in very different ways. And one was, well, actually, maybe they were both overtly done in a sense as well. And the only real difference really is one was for the greater good of man. Well, even then, if I say that, they both had the opinion of being the greater good of
What's good is
man.
a matter of viewpoint. And,
Yeah.
like Hubbard says, what's true for you is true for you. Well, the extinguishing of the Jewish religion and the Jewish bloodline was the greatest good for the greatest number for Germany through Hitler's eyes.
Mm,
But,
yep. And
you
then
have
through
to,
Gandhi,
through Gandhi,
no fighting, complete peace
right,
was his version of that.
right. And look at India today.
Mm,
Is it any better? Is it any worse? Look at Germany. Is it any better? Is it any
yep.
worse? But
Yep.
and who are we to judge on what's good, bad, or indifferent? But
Yep.
an incomplete cycle or a completed cycle of action is only as good as it is helpful to the dynamics, all of the dynamics.
Yep. The self, family, community,
Yeah,
spiritually.
planet,
Yep.
animals,
Planet.
the
Yep.
physical universe at large, all that stuff. And so
Yep.
that's why it's important to try and look at the most pro survival things. How many dynamics does it help? And it's easy for a being to justify, well, it helps all of my dynamics to do X. But does it
Yep.
really? Because
Yep.
the thing is that a lot of the things that a person creates aren't the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics, because a lot of it
Mm,
is impulsive, driven by a reactive mind that is full of incomplete cycles. So it's almost
yep.
preordainedly, if you'll excuse the new word, it's preordained to fail because you're creating on top of a create, on top of a create, on top of a create, on top
Mm,
of a create. And that is why the physical universe is persistent. It is
mm,
one big pancake on pancake on pancake of incomplete cycles by Thetans who agree, yeah, this needs to persist. So, we're all contributing to the persistence of the physical universe through our postulation, alteration, and incomplete ideation and doing this in the physical universe. So if you've got a lot of
mm.
earlier stuff going on, you are contributing to a furthering of the alter isness, not the as isness. And what you're doing when you're auditing a lot of people is you're unwinding this big, huge Gordian knot of alter is to getting an as isness.
Yep.
And you do this on a wider and wider aperture of scale as you go up the bridge. The amount of charge that you are handling when you get on the upper end of the OT levels is tremendous because you're undoing so many knots within knots, not only for yourself, KNOTS, not NOTS as in Ned for OTs. It is that, but you're undoing these persistent knots throughout the time track in a chain that are connected to you and other beings. And
Mm-hmm.
these other beings aren't even aware of what it is that you're doing, but it's because of your interactions with those beings. You got this butterfly effect. You do something with Joe, Joe does something with
Yes.
Bob, Bob does something with Sally, Sally does something with Mary, Mary does something with Steve. And so there's this almost cacophony or echo of I do something to you, you do something to me, they do something to this, and then next we're all extinguishing Jews.
Hmm.
And those are
But I
incomplete
think
cycles.
yes, and I think also like let's say there's an incomplete cycle between two people and two people only. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, let's say I make a decision on that incomplete cycle, that will also affect the other person, even if I made that decision solely for myself. Because the moment I change my being and remove that physical mass from my body, then I'm breaking that cycle. I'm no longer keeping it alive for the other person either.
That's right.
So for example, let's say you and I had a disagreement around something.
Hmm.
You storm off, I storm off. And then I think about it and I make a proper, like I end that cycle properly within myself. I don't talk to you about it. What are the chances that's going to affect your psyche and your mass around it as well?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
This is how the suppressed person rundown in Scientology, which is the ultimate auditing action to handle the suppression from a suppressive person without actually dealing with the suppressive person. You
Yeah.
do that.
Like
You
it's
do.
it's it's working on a psychic level,
Yeah,
um,
because we're all in the same room.
unseen.
Right. We're all in the same
Yeah.
room and you're handling it through the theta universe, not the physical universe. And you do that
That's
all the
right.
time on the OT levels. And so you're completing cycles of
Yep.
action for them without having to use the physical universe as a via. And we've talked about this before
Yes.
on telepathy and how you can be telepathic is the last thing you want to do is use the physical universe as a via because it's sort of like you have a perfect telecommunication device, which is you, and then you
Yep.
go, well, I'm going to
Yep.
run it through the physical universe, and of course they're going to get my communication. Nope.
Yep.
That
Yep. Yep. Yep.
you just skip the physical universe altogether, and you just address the being and their creations that are incomplete cycles, and you handle them with truth. And
Yes.
truth is the ultimate responsibility. That is how as isness occurs.
Hmm.
Lies
Yeah.
are
Which is
are the
also the
opposite.
most confronting aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
if you can't confront what it is that you've created in the beginning, you're going to end up in a world of hurt. What were your motives?
Mm.
What were your decisions? Why are you doing this? Why are you getting involved in
Hmm.
this particular action? Is it a truth or is it a lie?
Mm. So, what kind of um, what kind of physical things can a person feel? Like, let's say somebody's listening to this for the first time and it's a brand new concept to them.
Hmm.
Um, like, how would you know if you've got incomplete cycles? Like, what kind of physical things would occur to a person? You know, they've got an enormous amount of incomplete cycles stacked up in their being, and they're not
Well,
even aware of
what's the primary problem on your mind? That's an incomplete cycle.
it. Yep.
If you just ask the person as an auditor, and I'm not auditing anybody by doing this, okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not taking you in session. If you were just to ask a person what has been left uncommunicated as an auditing process, you could spend hours on that. What has been left
Yep.
uncommunicated? And you'd find that people would try to go to the theta universe immediately and then be slapped back and they'd be dropped down the tone scale into the physical universe and well I never did find that set of keys or I this or I that.
Yep.
But it all comes down to is it's an incomplete communication with someone or something or self. And you just get
Yep.
those off. What was left uncommunicated, whether it's uh I didn't communicate with the car and I didn't wash it.
Yes.
That's an incomplete communication. But, also at the bottom of that is the incomplete communication of what was it you were postulating in the beginning, and should you have postulated it? That's the one that can bake your noodle a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I decided I was going to rob a bank. The only the
Yeah.
only
Yep.
the only way to get rich is to play the lottery. Those are
Yes.
postulates, okay?
Yes.
And those are incomplete cycles of their own because
As
there's
well.
no there's
Yeah.
no responsibility there. You're placing responsibility on the lottery numbers being correct. You see?
Yep.
So you have to look at, well, what is it that I'm postulating? Well, if you're postulating killing off 10% of the population today, after you have your coffee and your Genghis Khan, what's underlying that's making you create these postulates that are going to become even further incomplete cycles? You've got to look at the
Mm-hmm.
basics, and the and the
Yep.
and those basics are what may get you to make and decide to make these postulates that are not the greatest good for the greatest number or
Yep.
yourself,
Yep.
because it's a solution to a problem that becomes a further problem.
Yep.
And a problem
Yep.
is
And
something
like you
that
said before,
persists.
it's just a bunch of pancakes that just keep stacking on top of each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. And that's
Yep.
that. And you have to go, okay, well, what wasn't completely communicated there? Well, mommy and daddy didn't love me.
Mm.
Well, how is that not communicated? Well, they didn't communicate it to me. They didn't know how to communicate it
Mm.
to me. And then you have to
Yep.
unwind that. And Genghis Khan, dad didn't give him enough attention. I'm not saying it's always a mommy daddy thing. I'm just using
Yeah.
that as
Yeah.
an
Yep.
example.
Yep.
I'm not trying to get Freudian
But it's
here.
pretty common. Yeah.
But it's pretty common, or I didn't get the attention that I needed to get. Okay, you didn't get the attention that you needed to get. Okay,
Yep.
why did you need that attention?
Yep.
You know, because attention is the second greatest particle in this universe, second only to admiration. If you can't get
Yep.
admiration, what are you trying to get? You're trying to get attention for admiration. And
Mm-hmm.
therein lies the rub.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's a very interesting concept, this one. Very powerful though when utilized.
Yeah.
Like you can resolve so much stuff over a cup of coffee, pen and paper, and just make some decisions on some shit that has been in the back of your mind for years, if
Yeah.
not decades.
Yeah, you write down a list of incomplete cycles, and then you go, okay, so let me unwind this.
Yeah.
How did this lead to this, lead to this, lead to this, lead to this, lead to this? And you can pull that thing all the way down. If you did that with just one thing, just with a pen and paper,
Yep.
your flows would absolutely turn around and your self-worth would skyrocket.
Instantly. And that's the incredible thing about it as well, is the moment you make a decision, and look, let's be fair, like some of them will require some kind of physical doing. Might be making a phone call,
Well,
finally sending
yeah,
that payment that you owe,
exactly.
apologizing to someone or telling someone to get effed, whatever it is for you. Once it's done, it's done. And the cool thing is, it doesn't even enter your mind ever again,
Right. You
which
just have
is,
to look at it,
which is, yeah,
you know,
it,
like
it
you
and
said.
the weight that falls off you is just incredible.
Yeah.
You can breathe, like your chest opens up when you breathe. You're not so constricted or looking at the ground all the time. You'll actually look up and just be like, huh, I've missed all this time.
Right. Right. And all of that goes
Mm.
around an incomplete cycle of action. You know,
Yep,
you're
yep,
you're the, you're this
yep,
wizard with this wand, and this wand is postulates, you put things into effect because you considered something to be a certain way. Well, why did you consider it to be a certain way? Because you used your wand earlier and you put another postulate there and another postulate with the wand, and you have this consideration, and you
Yeah,
unwind that and you go,
yeah,
oh, I did this because I wasn't loved enough. Okay, so
yeah,
why did you consider you weren't loved enough? Because I didn't get enough attention. I didn't get enough
yeah,
admiration.
yeah,
But did you
yeah,
give enough attention? Did you give enough admiration? It's a two-way street. It's a two-terminal
yeah,
universe. You can't just say I didn't get, I didn't get, I didn't get. What did you
yeah,
give? And I'm not trying to be
yeah.
corny here, but at the
But it's true.
very end of the Abbey Road, the Beatles' final album, what is the last concept of that album?
Oh God, I can't remember what the last song is.
The love you take
Here
is
Comes
equal
the
to
Sun,
the
is it?
no, that's the first song
No.
on the second side. The love you take is
Okay.
equal to the love you make.
Mm, mm. And you know what I find even more mind-blowing about a lot of these processes? They are so stupidly simple in nature,
Yeah.
yet so hard to A, confront, B, do, C, complete.
Yeah, they're really simple. Alex Collier, who is one of these, he's been around for 30 years, and he still does lectures. He said that the to get uh a little UFO, he says that the Andromedans say that the pain you carry is the love you fail to express,
Pretty much, which
which
is a
is
withhold.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
Just
and
being
that's
afraid to say something could be an incomplete cycle.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the same as what the Beatles were saying, The love you take is
Yeah.
equal to
Yeah.
the love you make. And who's
Yeah.
responsible for that? You know,
You.
resentment is a powerful thing, but it's also a postulate.
Mm. Yes, it is. Yes, it
Resentment
is.
comes from an incomplete cycle of action.
Mm. Yeah, it's really good.
What did you fail to
It's really good.
communicate?
Yeah.
Whether it's to a
Yeah.
person, to the physical universe, to yourself. Maybe you couldn't communicate it. Maybe you were Helen Keller, you were blind and deaf.
Which is interesting because even just acknowledging that could also complete your cycle. Just acknowledging that there was literally nothing that can be done about it and owning it that way. You know what? And it's funny because when you write stuff down, you get to look at it from an objective perspective, as opposed to trying to let it roll around in your mind space, which is completely infinite. The moment you put something on pen and paper, you look at it and you think, my God,
Yeah.
why was I even worrying about that?
Right.
What a
Well,
stupid bloody thought. And then you cross it out
yeah. Yeah.
and then it just disappears.
I
Like
would
it's insane.
yeah. I would have to say that the biggest, if you were to look at it on a higher arc, the biggest incomplete cycle a being can have is the failure to inspect properly.
Good one. Good one. Great one.
That is alter isness.
Mm,
Failure to inspect.
interesting.
Because if you
That
don't
was
want to
really
look
well
at it,
said.
if you don't want to look at it, it isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, which means you got to carry that shit to the end.
And you could carry it an awful long time because a being mocks up that mass. And what is that mocking
Yeah,
up of mass? And that failure to inspect is your
yeah.
creatingness, your postulates, and that's all you do.
Yes.
I
Create,
can,
create, create.
yeah, I conceive it to be this way,
Yep,
therefore it is. Boom.
yep, yep,
And then you go, I'm not going to inspect that. And that's the cycle. That is the cycle of action. That is as basic as it gets. You can't get any more basic with a being that does nothing but create. Either it
Yep.
controllably,
Yep.
or in this case, uncontrollably, and then fails to inspect their uncontrollability of their own creation. Mic drop.
And then you create Frankenstein,
That's right.
a monster you can't control.
That's right. You unleash the horde into the world, and you take out 10% of the population, but you won't inspect the
Yep.
fact of the damage that it causes. And how, I mean, if you were to just look
Yeah.
at the you were
Yep.
just look at the butterfly effect, how one thing affects another in the physical universe,
Yes. Yes.
how, as far as connections go, and I'd like to mention this, so people look this up on YouTube. There's two series from Great Britain, from the BBC, by a fellow by the name of James Burke. It's called Connections. And it takes you from chicken poop to the atomic bomb in one episode. How did this affect this, affect this, affect this, as far as inventions, how all of these ideas came up, and it's all the derivations of concepts from one thing to another.
Mm,
Same thing applies. It's on YouTube, it's free, they're excellent. Same thing applies to Genghis Khan. What effects
yes.
did he, what effects did his cause cost the human race this time around on this planet?
Mm,
How many great people were taken out that would have caused these effects that might have changed the entire path of history,
that's right. That's right.
because he failed to inspect the fact that he shouldn't be doing something like what he was doing. And
Yep.
I
Yep.
guarantee you, the guy that's Genghis Khan, if he's a poodle pissing on somebody's leg, sitting there shivering and whining, that would be a, a better state than what he's probably in as a being. This is what
Yep.
happens to
Yep.
beings because they paint themselves into a corner, into a smaller space, into a smaller space, into a smaller space, into a smaller space. And then all of a sudden,
Yep.
they can't even inhabit a body anymore, and they have to be somebody else as a being, and can't even control a body because they've reduced themselves down to a speck. A
Yes. Yes.
speck. And LRH even says the greatest fear of a Thetan is that they will, and I didn't say this, he did, but I agree with it. The greatest fear of a Thetan
Yep.
is that they will become a molecule. They will become completely
Mm,
solid. Now, my next question is, and I think this is a good place that we can leave this for people to ponder: how many grains of sand are on one beach alone, let alone in the physical universe?
a lot. So much
A
so I can't even compute it.
Right. So
Yeah.
this tells you a couple of things. Incomplete cycles are a bitch. It's time to take a look at them and inspect. Because if you don't,
Yeah.
you don't even look at time. Just look at where you could end up. You have to inspect.
Yeah.
And inspection requires responsibility. If you can't inspect, you're done for. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
There's
really good.
there's a leaky pipe and you're in a box. If you don't fix that leaky pipe, you're going to drown,
Yep.
because there's no way out, no windows, no door, no leaks. You're done for. If you
Yep.
handle the leaky pipe, okay, now you've got a shot, and then you can go from there. Just
Yep.
just a, just a little analogy.
Yes.
The
And I
failure
think,
to inspect.
and when you mentioned the sand, I thought to myself, okay, you start out as a solid rock, but all those waves that keep hitting you will eventually turn you into sand. You can't even perceive what your being should have been originally, because slowly, the rock just turned into sand.
Right. So an incomplete cycle is where you get from I am to I am. I am a limitless,
Yeah.
boundless being that can do anything and everything and is basically godlike, to
Mm,
a grain of sand on a beach or a molecule in that grain of sand, all because of your
yeah.
inability
Yeah.
to inspect. That's it.
Yeah.
It's all an
Yeah.
incomplete cycle. Failure to inspect. Your own
Yeah.
creates.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really good. Well done.
So I hope everybody enjoyed this little conversation. And this isn't me singing Kansas's Dust in the Wind, all we are is dust in the wind. That's not the point. It's the opposite. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Take a look. Take a look. So for Artie and myself, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast and it's given you some food for thought. Get up the bridge. It's the best thing you can do. Namaste,
Yep.
and we love you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.